Our woman's memoir that we read is Garlic and Sapphires by Ruth Reichel. She is a food critic for the New York Times, and when she dined at New York restaurants, she was recognized as a critic, leading to the cooks and the waitstaff attempting to dazzle her. To combat this, Ruth worked with her eclectic friend of her mother's, Claudia, to put together a variety of disguises, and when she transforms into these different people, she puts on the act.
So her first disguise was named Molly. This was a Midwestern woman. Then she became her mom. Wearing her mother's old clothing, she realized she was eerily similar to her mother, always sending dishes back to the food kitchen for the most minor imperfections when she was in this character. Then she became Chloe, a blonde, flirtatious woman, Brenda, an energetic redhead, and Betty, a soft-spoken elderly woman. Her final disguise was Emily, an uptight restaurant manager.
By the end of the memoir, a person who had grown closer to Ruth passes away. However, it ends on a positive note with Ruth realizing she does not want to be trapped at the Times, but rather wishes to expand her career options. And now let's take a look at Reichel's recipes as we go over some of our salient moments and opinions.
What's up, guys? Before we dive into the literary analysis of Garlic and Sapphires by Ruth Reichel, I wanted to bring a piece of the book to life. I made these French gougères. They're a French cheese pastry that I baked from scratch using a recipe from her memoir. And you'd think a book about these top-tier, insanely expensive and flashy foods that she goes and critiques in New York in the 90s would be super intimidating, but she throws these recipes in to ground the reader and remind them that at its core, food is about the comfort and soul, not just about flashing an Amex card and getting into these nice restaurants and eating some super expensive food. And I wanted to set that scene by the moment that she perfectly captures just the wild and almost ridiculous power that she held in the food industry in the 90s as a food critic for the New York Times, when she reviews the legendary restaurant called La Circa as herself instead of in disguise that she usually uses. The owner greets her by saying, "The King of Spain is waiting in the bar, but your table is ready." If you let that sink in, it shows how a literal monarch is benched behind her so that a newspaper writer or a journalist can eat first. I picked this moment because Reichel's word choice here is just brilliant at showing the sheer hypocrisy of the 1990s luxury food scene, especially in New York. It pulls us into this super exclusive world, but it also completely exposes how fake it all is. Restaurants don't care about hospitality, they care about who can give them a good rating. It's a masterclass of how society has perceived power, and they only want to care about pushing themselves to the top. This book isn't just about bashing snobby restaurants, though. It's surprisingly deep about her identity. My second passage is about Ruth reflecting on her favorite alter ego, Chloe. She writes, "Every disguise taught me something about myself. Chloe brought out a part of me I had never known existed. She liked to flirt, she didn't mind being taken care of, but she had a hard, tight center that was utterly cold." That's from page 134 in our memoir. She says this, and it honestly blows my mind that how poignant it all is. Looking at how her language flips, she goes from talking about her being fun and flirty to describing how hard and tight-centered that utterly cold Chloe was. It proves that her disguises weren't just Halloween costumes or dressing up for fun, but it actually messed with her head. This is the biggest takeaway of the book for me. Our identities are incredibly fragile. How people treat us changes who we become. And on that heavy note, I'm going to finish up my cheese puff and hand it off to my partners for their final thoughts.
An impressive thing Reichel does as a New York Times food critic is expanding the types of restaurants that get reviews. Previously, the Times had focused on French restaurants, but Reichel explores Korean and Japanese cuisine, offering a range of perspectives. She moved away from typical fancy dining to exploring cultural foods, such as matzah. I made this matzah bread that I took from the recipe in her memoir. And while it's not my favorite, I enjoy it because it offers a distinct cultural food that I've never tried before. And honestly, I think that's pretty good.
How's it going, guys? So, Ruth Reichel was a big-time food critic, but she acknowledges that being a food critic is a little silly. Telling rich people where to eat isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. So that's why one of her first goals when she came to the New York Times was to make food reviews something everyone would enjoy reading. Now this therefore gives the story literary merit. The way Ruth steps back from the glamour is something we can take a lesson from, and a representation of this idea is the way Rachel highlights her family values. One important example that I feel exemplifies this was when Ruth was reviewing steakhouses. She gave her 5-year-old son, Nicky, the responsibility of being the potato man, meaning he had to try all types of potatoes. She told him that this restaurant in particular, the Palm, had the best hash browns in the world. However, Nicky was disappointed with his hash browns. He said he'd prefer to have french fries, and hearing this, the waiter actually took him back to the kitchen to show him how the hash browns were made. His next batch was perfection. On page 110, Rachel describes how unfortunately Nicky was not allowed to tell his mother how the hash browns were made. He said, "Do you want to know the secret?" "Oh no, young man," said the waiter solemnly. He wagged his finger. "You must never tell. Remember, the recipe goes with you to the grave." Nicky looked up. "Cross my heart," he said. This is a heartwarming moment to me because it's one of a number of times where Rachel includes a humorous time with her family while also doing her job. One potential drawback for readers with this book is Rachel describes her experiences at the restaurants and then also includes her reviews for them. So this can lead to some points being repetitive. But I think that including the true review that she published in the New York Times adds an extra level of authenticity to her memoir. And so I made these hash browns using the recipe in the memoir.